What's going on, y'all? It's your man Stephen Bardo coming at you with another edition of Bardo's Breakdown. Just wanted to come live a little bit. They just did the reveal on BTN, the conference reveal for the various Big Ten teams. So I'm going to look at about, what do I have here? Two, four, six, about the top seven that I think are worth looking at in terms of their schedules. And so we'll go through it quickly and then I'll answer your questions. But you'll get a sense of who I think are going to be interesting. Obviously, the new teams that are coming in, a lot of those games, I'm really curious to see, and so we'll go through it. Let's start with Purdue. Um, so I recall Brandon Gaudin and myself. We did Maryland at Purdue. Was it last year or a couple years ago, I believe? And it was a hell of a game. Purdue was up double digits, and Maryland came storming back. That's with Jameer Young and company. Juju Watkins kind of came alive in the second half. No Zach Edey this season, but Trey Kaufman-Wren may have something to say about that as well. So with Derek Queen and Juju Reese versus TKR and whoever else Purdue is going to put up front, will it be Daniel Jacobson? Will it be Will Berg? We'll see. But there'll be a two-headed monster on both sides going at it December 8th. And then Purdue has had problems with the Northwestern Wildcats the last couple seasons. So it'll be interesting to see if Northwestern's defense can kind of stymie Purdue, because they really just beat the crap out of Zach Edey last couple matchups and got away with it. And were able to overcome and upset Purdue a couple times. And so we'll see if that trend holds true. And then you guys remember when Travion Williams, Jaden Ivey went into Rutgers and Ron Harper Jr. had a double clutch half-court shot to beat Purdue at Rutgers. And it's always interesting when Purdue and Rutgers lock horns, especially out in Piscataway, New Jersey. So that one will be interesting. Purdue at Rutgers. We'll see how that shakes out. Always Purdue hosting Indiana January 31st, the rivalry for the bragging rights of Indiana. Umar Ballo, Malik Renew up front. Bryson Tucker from Indiana, guys, don't sleep. You keep hearing me talk about him. Nobody's talking about him. He's going to be a factor. That might be a game where he may come out there a little bit. And then obviously Purdue closes their regular season at Illinois, similar to last season when we were on NBC, Robbie Hummel and myself, and Little Bird Eagle, we're calling that one. So that's always a fun one to close the Big Ten slate for both of those teams. Moving on to Indiana. Just referenced Indiana at Purdue on January 31st will be a great matchup. Rutgers, Big Ten didn't do them any favors, man. They've got a couple stretches that are rough. So Indiana gets Rutgers, the upstart, the youngins coming into Bloomington. We'll see how Rutgers handles that pressure at Simon Scott Assembly Hall January 2nd. And Indiana hosts Illinois January 14th. It'll be interesting to see how Luke Goody is received by his former teammates. I know the Indiana fans will love him because he's a great guy, an excellent shooter. He'd be one of the best shooters in the Big Ten this season. But I'm curious to see how that's going to shake out. And then UCLA coming into Indiana February 14th. What will the Bruins look like? They've got a lot of talent on paper. Tyler Bilodeau, the transfer from Oregon State at 6'9". He's had some experience going up against Umar Ballo coming in from Arizona. So that'll be interesting. That matchup, William Kyle, a freakish athlete coming in from South Dakota State, was that conference's defensive player of the year. So it'll be an interesting matchup with what UCLA is going to do defensively to try to, throw different looks and see. So we'll see what Mick Cronin's group will look like under the pressure at a Simon Scott Assembly Hall. And then Indiana's got to go out to Oregon late in the conference slate. We'll see what Dana Altman and what his team looks like up front. And Fale Dante not in the mix anymore. And so I'm curious to see what the bigs at Oregon will look like. They will have some experience again with Bardo coming in from Arizona, and also Miles Rice coming in from Washington State, Kanan Carlisle coming in from Stanford. So there will be some familiarity with those rosters of Indiana and Oregon. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shakes out. The Fighting Illini, they've got an interesting mix. They've got to go to Oregon January 2nd. I think that's going to be interesting because the backcourt of Oregon is going to give problems to the backcourt of Illinois. You know, we know Kasparis Jacksionis will hold his own based on his overseas experience, and I think that he'll have enough time in Champaign, enough time with his teammates to kind of get his feet wet. They've got a brutal non-conference slate, do the Illini, so they'll know who they are going into this Oregon game on the road. Then they've got Indiana. We talked about that. How will the Illini fare in the hostile territory at the Hoosiers? And then Rutgers, by February 15th, those youngins should have enough games under their belt to where you're going to understand what Rutgers looks like. We talk about Dylan Harper. We talk about Ace Bailey, but Lathan Somerville, big freshman, very talented. Not people are talking about him. He's going to be a factor along with Emmanuel Ogbole up front. Those guys won't be asked to score necessarily, but they've got enough size up front to defend the rim against the likes of Marez Johnson and Tomislav Ivicic of Illinois. That'll be a fun matchup. And then UCLA coming in to State Farm Center, and what Mick Cronin will do defensively, they'll know who they are at that time coming up against a very talented Illinois squad. Let's take out Oregon's slate. They go to Ohio State early. We haven't talked a lot about Ohio State, but they're going to be interesting because they're going to have one of the better backcourts in the Big Ten. Michi Johnson comes back to Ohio State. He had a very good run at South Carolina. He teams up with Bruce Thornton in the backcourt. Also have Bradshaw on the wing coming in from San Diego State. So Ohio State's backcourt, not talked about a lot, but they're going to challenge Jackson Shellstad and TJ Bamba. That'll be an interesting matchup. Then, you know, Oregon and UCLA, there's some familiarity there. Obviously, them both in the Pac-12, but different rosters. So I'm going to be interested in seeing Oregon at UCLA January 30th. And then Oregon travels out to Michigan State on February 8th. They will have made a couple trips to the Midwest, now coming back to the Midwest in early February is going to be interesting. And then I talked about Indiana coming to Oregon late. I think that will be more for NCAA at-large bids. Obviously, the Big Ten Conference Tournament will come right after that, but those two teams will be vying. They should be vying for at-large NCAA bids, and so that will be a nice resume boost for both teams. Let's take a look at UCLA's schedule. At Illinois, February 11th. At Indiana, February 14th. That's an interesting trip because all those West Coast trips, West Coast teams have to make a trip out to the Midwest and then out east. And so this will be their Midwest swing to get at Illinois and at Indiana back to back as a gauntlet. But you've got 3 days in between. They can stay out here. They can go from Champaign. They can take their time getting to Bloomington. Maybe they stay in Champaign for a day. Maybe they get to Bloomington early. But it'll be interesting to see how these West Coast teams manage their trip to the Midwest and then their trip out east. And then those two games back to back, that's a rough one. And then they got to come back to Purdue late in February and then come back. I don't know if they'll stay from the Purdue to Northwestern, but that's about 4 or 5 days. I haven't looked at the schedule. Let me see. Let me look at the calendar, what we're doing on February, because you know February always is changing. Okay, so they'll play February 28th, and then there'll be 3 games before they have to play Northwestern. So I'm going to be interested in seeing how these programs now, guys, they have sports medical staffs that study this stuff, whether it's, will they stay in West Lafayette to spend the night and sleep and try to get sleep after the game and then take their time, or will they go right from the game? They'll come up to Evanston, and so they'll have 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 nights to sleep before they have to play Northwestern. It'd be fascinating to see. That's going to be a big part of this scheduling this season for the Big Ten teams, how their medical staffs approach their teams and how they do these trips. It's going to be fascinating because it's going to play into who will win the regular season, no doubt. Let's take a look at Michigan State's schedule. They host Illinois January 19th. They're at UCLA February 4th, host Indiana February 11th, and then they got to go to Maryland February 26th. So Michigan State looks like they spaced theirs out quite a bit, their schedule. And then let's look at Wisconsin's at Illinois February 10th. They go to Rutgers January 6th. So they catch Rutgers early in the Big Ten slate. I don't know if that'll be advantage, seeing that, Rutgers is dependent on 2 diaper dandies. We'll see how that goes. Wisconsin and Northwestern will be an interesting one because not a lot of people are talking about the Wildcats, but they returned 4 starters. So that will be an interesting matchup. 2 of the older teams in the Big Ten linking up, Wisconsin at Northwestern February 1st. And then Wisconsin hosting Oregon late in February, that Big Ten grind. It'd be interesting to see how these Pac-12, former Pac-12 teams handle the weather, the travel, the grind that is the Big Ten. That's going to be an interesting matchup to see Wisconsin hosting a very talented Oregon team. Now, I don't have this listed, but let me share something with you guys. Rutgers' last 6 games at Oregon, at Washington, they host USC, at Michigan, at Purdue, and they host Minnesota. That's brutal. And look, I think the Big Ten did a great job scheduling because whatever they did, there's going to be complaints. But geez, guys, let me run this by you again. This is at the end of this is their last 6 games of the Big Ten slate. They've gone through the gauntlet at Oregon, at Washington, come back and host USC. Then they got to go to Michigan, go to Purdue, and then they host Minnesota. And Ben Johnson's teams at Minnesota, they always play well at the end of the year. So they better load up early because they've got Ohio State. Rutgers has got to go to Ohio State in one of those first 2 Big Ten games that everybody has. One of their first ones is at Ohio State, December 7th. That's going to be a challenge. Then they resume Big Ten play. They got to go to Indiana January 2nd. So the scheduling didn't do Rutgers any favors. That's a really, really difficult slate. One of your first 2 games in the Big Ten slate is at Ohio State. Okay. On paper, it doesn't look tough, but that's going to be a tough game in December. Then you resume Big Ten play. You got to start at Indiana January 2nd. And then your last 6, that's rough. That's rough. So I just wanted to share some of those with you guys. I want to see what your thoughts are on that. Let me see. What's up, Kenneth? Alexander got an extension and raise, but not Anderson. Piper wonders if this is an indication that Anderson is leaving Illinois basketball. It's been interesting because there hasn't been any word out of Champaign with that situation. Jeff Alexander is certainly, he certainly has earned that extension and raise. He does a fantastic job. Jeff is actually one of the assistants that often gets overlooked by the sorry guys, just had a call. Jeff Alexander gets often overlooked by when people talk about the Illinois staff, right? So it's interesting though, and I'm happy for him, and we'll see what happens with Tim, right? We'll see what happens with him. But thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate you tuning in. And so interesting to see, guys, how this is stuff shaking out. I didn't want to come on here too long. I just want to get some highlights from some of the teams that I think will be favored in the Big Ten slate. And we'll see how it turns out. But Mike Williams, thanks for tuning in. Thank you all who tuned in. Let me know if you got any more questions, because I'm going to wrap up here quickly. But fun reveal today. Nice job by BTN of coming through and putting those on. Let me throw these up really quickly before I get out of here. There's some of the highlights of the Purdue schedule. There's some of the Indiana highlights there. Obviously at Purdue, at Oregon towards the end of the regular conference slate is going to be interesting. You see the Illinois schedule. And I like that at Oregon, January 2nd. Obviously, Illinois, one of the tougher non-conference slates in the country, but that's going to be an interesting test to resume Big Ten play in January. You got the Oregon Ducks. I'm curious to see what they're going to look like February 8th at Michigan State, and then hosting Indiana coming down the stretch. UCLA, those two trips to Illinois and Indiana, that would be one trip, and then later in the end of February at Purdue and at Northwestern. Fascinated to see how the medical staff at UCLA is going to handle that. And then Michigan State at UCLA, February 4th. Michigan State fans ought to be happy to be going to LA in February. I'll be surprised if there won't be a ton of Michigan State fans trying to get on that trip. And then going to Maryland will be interesting late in February. I believe Juju Reese and Derek Queen will probably have their mojo intact by that time. And then Wisconsin, we talked about it. I'm really interested to see what Wisconsin does early at Rutgers, and then also hosting Oregon on the backside. All right. That'll do it for this one. Real quick one, but interesting to see these conference reveal these games. Hopefully you got something out of this. Make sure you go to bardostribe.com and get your free copy of hold on. Where am I? Oh, Triple Threat. There we go. Go to bardostribe.com to get your free copy of Triple Threat. You'll be included in the newsletter, and you also have an opportunity to check out the different levels of the inner circle that is the tribe. Also, go to Bardo Media, like, share, and subscribe. If you guys like this type of content, please share it with others that may enjoy this. It helps the algorithm and helps the growth of the channel. And I really appreciate you guys. If you want to be on the inner circle that is Bardo's Breakdown, you can do it by going to Bardo's Tribe, but you can also text me, 312-847-2739, to be in the inner circle via text. All right, guys. Thanks so much for this update here, this short one. Just wanted to come on and show some of the highlights of the Big Ten Conference games that I'm looking forward to. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you next time.